The Upper Cumberland is fortunate to have some great organizations that hire thousands of people and are great civic customers, or great civic citizens. And all of you in here are part of that group. Today we're going to recognize a very successful organization that is truly homegrown, iconic in the Upper Cumberland, and a great supporter of Boy Scouts. To tell us about Averitt Express and help us understand their philosophy, the size of their market, and their corporate culture, I want to call out Brad Brown, Manager of Marketing and Communications for Averitt Express. So Brad, if you come on up. Now, let's give Brad a hand. I told Brad earlier, I said, I might try to be funny at one point. He said, I don't care. You just do whatever you want to do. So Brad's a professional speaker, so nothing bothers Brad. So Brad and I have at least three things in common. One's all our kids outnumber us. We both have to listen to Joe Roberts here at College Side every Sunday. And Brad and I are both SOBs. We're both son of a banker.
That's great. Wow, you're setting the bar awful high for me, Thomas. Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I have to make a confession. I feel a little bit out of place. I kind of feel like a guy who was a part of a small country church, and there was a big speaker that was coming in, and he had to cancel at the last minute, and so this guy had to fill in, and he told his audience that he felt like a piece of cardboard where a window pane ought to be. And after he was done, a little old lady came up to him and said, "Oh, don't you worry about it. You were every bit as much as a pain as that other guy that was going to be here." You know, I've been to this event for the past several years, and I've listened to astronauts and Titans radio announcers and the fittest man on earth. So, you know, I feel a little uncomfortable being up here. I don't have any great personal accomplishments. I don't even think I'm the second fittest man on earth. I'm not sure where on the ranking I stand, but I do have some personal experience with scouting. In 1983, at the First United Methodist Church, I joined the Cub Scouts. And I still have my cap that my parents have saved all these years, and it still fits. I also still have my neckerchief and belt, but my belt does not fit, unfortunately. Do not have the handbook, no. I never rose to the rank of Eagle Scout, but I did participate in the Pinewood Derby. In fact, I'll never forget going to Salina and to my grandfather's house where he had a wood shop out back, and he helped work with me to build my Pinewood Derby car. And he must have done something right because we ended up winning the whole Pinewood Derby. And it meant a lot to me that he would invest his time in my life. So at an early age, the Scouts really helped me see the value of investing in people. And I'm proud to be here today to represent an organization that shares that same value. You may have heard the story about a wealthy Texas rancher who had a 16-year-old daughter. She was approaching marrying age and had no suitors at the time, so he devised a plan. He invited all of the eligible young men from a 100-mile radius to his giant home and had a giant meal for them, and about midnight invited them out to his swimming pool. Now, he had the foresight to stock his pool with alligators and water moccasins, and he told them that he was going to make them an offer, that if any of them had the courage and commitment to swim the full length of that swimming pool, he was going to give them three choices. He would offer them 2,500 acres of his greatest land. If they didn't want that, he would offer them $1 million in cash. And if they didn't want that, he would offer them the hand of his daughter in marriage. And as the sole heir of the family fortune, they would eventually inherit all that he owned. No sooner had he had the offer out of his mouth did he see a young man jump in one end and emerge on the other end dripping wet. And he had set a world record in swimming. So he walked up to the young man who was shaking and looked him in the eye and said, "Young man, are you interested in the 2,500 acres of land?" And he said, "No, sir." are you interested in the $1 million cash? And he said, no, sir. And he said, oh, great, I have to assume that you want the hand of my beautiful daughter in marriage. And he said, no, sir. And he said, well, what do you want then? He said, well, I want to know the name of the man that pushed me in the swimming pool. I think we can all agree that that young man was motivated. And that's what I want to talk a little about today, motivation. What drives people to do the things they do? What drives organizations like the Boy Scouts or Averitt Express to do the things that they do? I look out over this audience, I see a lot of familiar faces. I'm born and raised in Cookeville. I see a lot of leaders, banks, religious organizations, education, civic organizations, Tennessee Tech. So I know that there's lots of people in this room that know what people-focused leadership is all about. And I know that you know that one of the most important qualities in a leader is found in the very first word of the Scout Oath. A Scout is trustworthy. Trustworthy. Trust is one of the most important attributes that a leader can have. It's at the bedrock of any outstanding organization. Simon Sinek, in his national best-selling book, Start With Why, says this: leading is not the same as being a leader. Being the leader means you hold the highest rank, either by earning it, having good fortune, or navigating internal politics. Leading, however, means that others willingly follow you, not because they have to, not because they're paid to, but because they want to. Those who lead are able to do so because those who follow them trust that the decisions made at the top have the best interest of the group at heart. In turn, those who trust work hard because they feel like they're working for something bigger than themselves. I'd like to ask you all leaders that are here today, why do people follow you? Do they follow you primarily out of guilt or fear or for a weekly paycheck? Or do they follow you because they can trust you or because you call them to something bigger than themselves? I'd like to challenge you with a thought. You can get short-term results from fear or guilt or money, but you cannot create fierce loyalty, devotion, or ownership that way. 18 years ago, my wife and I had been living in Nashville. We decided to move back to Cookeville, and I was fortunate enough to get an offer from 2 different organizations. One of them was Averitt, and I was poring over what I was going to do. And I happened to have a conversation with my dad. He probably doesn't even remember this. You can tell me later if you remember this. He said, you know, something about Averitt, if you're in the grocery store line and you say something bad, and there's an Averitt employee behind you, they will fight you. They will challenge you right there to a fight because you're disrespecting their company. And I remember thinking, I was really attracted to that. Something was special, something was unique about that. And I did choose to begin my journey with Averitt. I have to confess, when I started, I didn't know much about Averitt. I had seen their tagline etched on the side of their trailers: our driving force is people. It turns out what little I knew turned out to be a lot more than I realized, because that tagline is not just etched on the side of trailers, but it's etched all over the corporate culture. And I believe that's because it was born out of the hearts of our leadership. Our driving force is people. Over the past 18 years, my understanding of that has evolved. At first, I understood on the most simple level, our driving force is people. Our frontline associates are very important. Our drivers, particularly, are the lifeblood of our organization. But as time went by, I began to understand it in a different way, in a more deep way. I had access, a little bit more access to leadership and to our culture, and I saw another meaning, that what drives Averitt, what motivates our leadership, is a genuine love for people. That's come to mean a lot to me personally, especially in light of my faith. Averitt's a transportation company. We're not a religious organization. but it's impossible for me to ignore the impact of the teachings of Jesus on our culture. Jesus wasn't a businessman, but he was in the business of people. He taught us that success in the people business demands selflessness. He said things like, treat others the way you want to be treated. The last will be first, and the first will be last. Whoever wishes to be first among you will be your servant. One of his followers said, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. I believe, whether we acknowledge it or not, or whether we even realize it or not, that God has implanted within us a thirst that can only be quenched by taking the focus off of ourselves and putting it on to others. Jesus modeled the values of service, compassion, humility, and generosity, and I'm proud to say that those values are woven into the fabric of Averitt. And I believe that they've played a valuable role in whatever success we have achieved. I've seen what energizes Averitt's leadership the most. It's serving people, investing in people, caring about the future of people, making winners out of people, seeing personal growth in people, and elevating an entire industry through the professionalism of people. And I'm proud to see our driving forces people lived out every day. For me, the reality of our driving forces people began on day number 1, as I sat in a room with about 50 truck drivers, and I watched our owner come into the room. I watched him go around and shake everybody's hand, look them in the eye. I listened as he took their questions, and I knew something was different about this place. I remember when I was challenged to write a message about our monthly performance that was going to go out to the company, and I was going to visit with one of the executive team members that was going to explain a little bit about our operations. And I remember thinking, I may not even get 2 or 3 minutes from this guy. He doesn't have time for me. I'm just, somebody that's new. He probably don't even know who my name is. 45 minutes later, I had gotten a dissertation on the difference between fixed and variable costs. And it meant a lot to me, not just the knowledge, but the fact that he would spend that much time with me was very valuable, and it made a statement to me. I've seen that investment continue in my life through conferences, classes, and most important, conversations. And I've even seen our driving forces people alive when it wasn't easy. We were growing in Atlanta several years ago, and we had built a large facility on one side of town. That was going to mean that a facility on the other side of town was going to be consolidated. And that was going to mean that if we didn't act creatively, there were going to be some drivers that were going to lose their jobs. And I sat in a room with 3 or 4 of our executive team members just listening. I was going to help draft the communications about this. And I watched them for hours pour over all the ways that we could possibly keep every driver employed and be fair and consistent to everybody else. I'll never forget that. It made a statement to me that our driving force is people. But it wasn't just the nature of our executives, it was leadership on all levels. Averitt has an employee giving or an associate giving organization called Averitt Cares for Kids. One of the organizations that benefits is St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. And we had all of our leaders come to Nashville several years ago and hosted a patient family, one of the young ladies who had been treated for cancer. And they talked about the difference that organizations like Averitt made to them to help save their daughter's life, and there was not a dry eye in the room. That made a statement to me. And certainly as I got more involved in the marketing and communications efforts, I got to know a little bit more about the organizations that Averitt helps and contributes to, whether it be economic development or organizations like the Scouts, athletic programs, schools, Tennessee Tech. It made a statement to me about generosity, certainly including the Boy Scouts, in particular the Latimer Reservation and the Boxwell Reservations. I've preached a sermon, and I don't want to leave you with the idea that Averitt is perfect, because we are not. But I have come to trust in Averitt's leaders. And just as important, I've come to trust in Averitt's leadership style. Whether it's teamwork or communication, having an open-door atmosphere, measuring and recognizing outstanding performance, calling people to something bigger than themselves, giving back to organizations like the Boy Scouts who invest in people. At some point, my trust hit a tipping point, and that's when it clicked for me. I moved from seeing myself as not just an employee, but an associate, as a co-owner. I moved from just being aware of our culture to an advocate of it. The Averitt culture has made me a better husband, a better father, and a better coach. And that's why if you're ever in front of me at the grocery store line, I better not hear you say something about Averitt. In closing, I want to say thank you again for the opportunity to speak today, and say thank you to the Scouts for how you invest in young people, for teaching them what selfless leadership looks like, for inspiring them to be trustworthy, for giving them opportunities to serve, and for calling them to a purpose bigger than themselves. In a sense, we are all good Scouts when we do these things. And whether our business is banking, law, medicine, education, transportation, or scouting, or something else, let's remember, true success will only be realized when our driving force is people.
I think you see now why we chose Averitt Express today is to highlight our community. It's a real privilege to have them. I want to give Brad a good scouting award from our district, so if you would take this on behalf of the Scouts for all of Averitt Express, and if all the Averitt folks, if you don't mind, just stand up here just a second so everybody can recognize you all. We appreciate everyone being here.
Well, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Brad, for those words of wisdom and that challenge for us to place others above ourselves. Really appreciate that. And thanks again to Averitt for all that you've done in our community across Middle and across all of Tennessee, and all you do for this country in your service to others, and in particular today to scouting. We really appreciate it.